Well, hello everybody. Thanks for joining us today on our LinkedIn live session here at 10:80. I apologise in advance for my croaky throat, which means it's a great excuse for me to hand over the reins of most of the talking to my two fabulous guests today. And I'm joined by Alyson and Kate, and I'll let them introduce themselves before we get into the session properly itself. So, Alyson, perhaps you could introduce yourself first, if you would, please.
Yes, of course. Thanks, Dean. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am Alyson Ainsworth, an executive and career coach with 1080, and also a resilience practitioner. Done quite a bit of work in the area of mental health and well-being, and really looking forward to talking to you today about the subject of burnout.
Marvellous. Thank you. And Kate, please tell the world who you are.
Thanks, Dean. And again, thanks to everyone for joining. My name's Kate Hughes. I'm a meditation teacher and mindfulness coach. I set up my own business 5 years ago, Kate Hughes Meditation. So I teach mindfulness and meditation in the workplace, as well as many other sort of events and workshops that I run. So I was actually coached by Alyson to get into this career. So I can vouch for Alyson's fabulous ability to coach someone in doing a switch from a corporate world, which is where I was, into my own small wellbeing business.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. I thought you were going to say then, so it's all Alyson's fault. So that was, but in a good way. So that's quite good. Thanks for that. So I thought what we could do with our discussion today, I'm always conscious of time on these LinkedIn live sessions. We only have half an hour, so let's go straight into our first question. I think probably the question that a lot of people will be asking, and I'll start, Alyson, with you if I may, is, well, what actually is burnout then? You know, when we're talking about it, what is it? Perhaps you could tell us, please.
Yeah. Burnout is often described as the misalignment of input and output. So it can be, particularly in the workplace, the chronic imbalance between your job demands and your job resource. And again, a lot of work's been done on this topic, particularly in the last, I would say, in the last 10 years or so. Arianna Huffington, you may be aware of, the American businesswoman who set up her global business Thrive in 2016, was often quoted as somebody, the reason she set her business up was because she nearly lost an eye. She was working in the corporate world and she was so tired, she passed out and she hit her face on the desk as she went down, breaking her cheekbones and needing a lot of stitches, and, as I say, nearly lost an eye. That was a result of excessive work, which, you know, was later deemed to be burnout. And again, there are a lot of organisations studying this, and I just wanted to give you a couple of scary facts from the McKinsey survey in 2022 that says that there are £322 billion in lost revenue globally through burnout, and 52 billion of that is in the UK alone. 50% of the countries surveyed were experiencing or had experienced or at risk of experiencing burnout. And 86% of the employees surveyed had high levels of exhaustion. And 80% of HR's time was spent with dealing with issues associated with burnout. And again, the corporate organizations are really waking up to the fact that this is becoming an issue, that they need to create that safe space and not encourage toxic workplace issues to seep out. And I'm going to hand over to Kate, because I know she's going to talk a little bit about her experience in that as well, and share some stories with us around that will bring that to life. But there are some really scary numbers there.
When you put it, as soon as you go into billions, you just think, wow, how can it have cascaded into such a big, colossal amount of money, especially when you consider how many people there are in the UK, billion, it's just an incredible, astonishing figure. Kate, in terms of what is burnout, but also moving on to our other question, by all means add to that what is burnout, but I'm really keen for us to also explore, what does it look like? What does it feel like? If I'm somebody who is potentially at burnout stage, how would I know what would it look like or feel like to me?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I think one of the big things for me was that I was very much wedded to my job. I worked as a solicitor and I worked hard and I played hard, but so did everyone. I didn't think there was anything unusual about what I was doing. And it was only looking back that there were several warning signs that I completely ignored that really manifested it in physical illness. But I didn't listen to any of them. I was so, blinkered. I was so focused on my lifestyle, which was, probably 80% work, 20% social. And I would say the more stressed I got, the more the social side of it probably got eked out even more. But I ultimately, I had a problem with my eyesight. I didn't fall over onto a desk. I actually lost the sight in one of my eyes. And, that was the thing for me that made me, I had to stop then, because as a lawyer, you have to read a lot of documents and I couldn't do my job properly. And it was only when I got to that point and I was going for all these brain scans and everything else that I realized I really needed to change my lifestyle. And in fact, I was advised by the doctors to change my lifestyle, and they couldn't work out what had happened with the sight loss. And in the end, they said all we can attribute that to is stress. I had a number of other symptoms as well. And of course, when you're in that sort of place where you're waiting to find out, what sort of diagnosis you might get, that's when your sleep falls apart completely. So many other strands of what you took for granted just fall away. And it's not a question of being able to look after yourself or not. You're so deep in it that you can't see the wood for the trees. And I very much enjoyed my job, even though I was so unwell. And I didn't work for a company, unfortunately, that were particularly supportive. And I was a great example of presenteeism. I was there, but I couldn't really do my job, even though I still loved it. And so, yeah, there were lots of little signals, but I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't have the knowledge, at all to pick up on any of them. And I think when we get so engrossed in what we're doing, it's easy to forget we've got to look after ourselves. And actually, there are warning signs. What are they? How can I pick up on them? So that was my experience. And yeah, it feels like a very lonely place, especially when the insomnia kicks in as well.
Yeah, I think what's really alarming about that is how, and I don't think it's probably, you're not alone in this, where you've almost reached breaking point. So it's like an all or nothing at all sort of scenario. And as you say, the blinkers are on because you're powered by adrenaline and habit and expectation and culture. And then it's only when you reach breaking point that you are allowing yourself to actually do something about it. Alyson, do you want to pick up on anything on there, John, or shall we go straight into looking at what some of those warning signs might be? Because I know you've probably got some examples around burnout, what it looks like and feels like as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth acknowledging that Kate's story, and I've heard it many times firsthand, and lots of examples since where people have said to you, "Oh, Kate, you look amazing," and I remember that story when you met somebody at court and they said to you, "You look amazing, and you've lost loads of weight," and you said to me, "I haven't lost loads of weight. I'm just happy now. I'm just in a different space because my job is not doing the damage it was doing." And I think some of those realizations are really important, to look back and say, yeah, it was absolutely the right thing to make a change in your career.
I'm quite lucky then, because I've only met smiling Kate. I don't know the Kate from before, so I don't have a frame of reference. But it's interesting that people do see that sort of vast difference. And before we go into the warning signs, I've got a question come in that I'd like to just share. it's a really good point that Michael's saying and asking, which is, to what extent is burnout an issue of poor management and leadership?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
From a sort of corporate point of view, I think poor management and leadership will definitely be part of something that happens. And I don't think it's always intentional. I think sometimes managers and leaders are just simply not equipped with the right skills to be able to support people. And I think there is a massive skills gap there, which needs plugging. So it's not always done on purpose. But poor management and leadership does lead to toxicity in a workplace. Because if they can't see it, and if they think that, and they're not role modeling it, that's the other thing, is if they are working excessive hours and therefore expecting other people to work excessive hours, then it creates that culture that is unhelpful and is toxic.
Okay, so if we could just go onto the warning signs, because we've batted this around already a couple of times, the terminology. Alyson, if I just stay with you for a moment on that, how would you describe the warning signs? And I'm really putting myself in, if it was me, how would I know? What would be those telltale signs that need to ring that alarm bell for me, do you think?
Well, I think particularly when I'm working with clients who are experiencing it or are in risk or in danger of it, the most common ones, I mean, Kate's mentioned them: excessive tiredness, the feeling of lack of control, or feeling overwhelmed, that whole overwhelm piece. And that plays in both in your professional and your social life. And a lot of that is about not being able to maintain your boundaries and also prioritizing. So everything becomes urgent. Everything is on the to-do list, and which just creates an excessive workload of, you will never get to the bottom of that pile. There is also that sort of cynicism sometimes that creeps in around, and a detachment from work, and generally feeling very unappreciated by your employer, because you don't feel very supported. And therefore, one of the signs is that you can withdraw from activities, and particularly social events. You think, oh, I haven't got time to do some of that stuff, or I don't see the value in it. And the word value actually is a really interesting one, because I think quite often you see a values mismatch. So between your values and the values of the organisation. And certainly I see that quite a lot in career transition, when somebody leaves an organisation and they look back and they think about their values. Sometimes they say, oh, actually, I could see that my values had separated from the organisation.
And Kate, what about yourself? What are some of the warning signs? You mentioned a couple earlier, but what else should we be on on our radar?
Yeah, I think sleep was mentioned a little bit. Very broken sleep, definitely a big one. When you're not so in touch with your friends, and your family, I completely prioritised my working life, and that didn't help. I think the pressures that we've talked about, and Michael's question was great with, is it to do with management and leadership? It's also to do with the expectation we put on ourselves, and, what we expect of ourselves. And coming from a legal background, the pressure was immense, but I put most of that on myself. So a warning sign could be that your expectation of what you can do and achieve does not align with reality. And just realizing that. And it's great if you do have a good manager, really good HR team, to be able to sit down and thrash out what are the expectations. But again, Alyson mentioned boundaries. When your boundaries are shot, really good sign that something's, again, not aligned properly.
Yeah, and I think we often talk about, and I see a lot of businesses having, what their values are, but not every business describes what their people values are, and I think that's something I think is really, really important, is understanding, well, what is that expectation? What is that culture? What environment will it be like? Especially if you are on that career transition, you're moving upwards, or you're moving across, or you're, you know, having a complete change. Is what will that look like? And I was having a conversation with somebody only the other day where they were talking about they were going to ask for a pay rise, and I said, well, what extra expectation will come with that? And I think we can sometimes invite it on ourselves as well, can't we? You were talking about, Kate, about you put that pressure on yourself. And I think that probably leads us on really, really nicely to my next question. And Kate, perhaps if I stay with you on this one, because you've made that big change for yourself, and it was at that breaking point, and probably people might be watching and thinking, well, do I need to make that bigger change, or are there smaller changes? So I think the question on the screen now is a really good one to ask at this point. What can you do about it? What can we do about it to try and reduce the risk of burnout, or to do something about it if we are at that critical point?
Well, my sort of exit from the corporate world was to a mindfulness, meditation background. So I might be slightly biased in this regard, but becoming aware of your own self is a big part of this, from my point of view. Being able to read the signs, you know, when you're in a stress situation, how does your body feel? What's happening, to you? And it might be that you've got sweaty palms, your heart's racing, you might get a particular stress headache, was always something that happened to me. So learning to be in touch with yourself, and that might sound really very basic, but I come across a lot of people, and, you know, to even say, you know, can you feel your legs on the chair? Well, not really, no. So we're very out of touch, because we spend a lot of time living in our minds. We're very flighty. When we lose a connection with the physical body. So understanding what the physical body's doing, and understanding that there are ways to influence how you respond. And that might sound like, well, Kate, that's not in your body, that's your mind. But actually your mind is where it's all at. That's where the really powerful part of you that can influence everything about your life and everything about your body is your mind. So learning how to be present and aware is a big step forward in making change for yourself. And that doesn't mean you've got to, hand in your notice and go and live on some retreat in the Himalayas for 6 months. It could mean that you decide you're going to do a 5-minute breathing exercise every day, or you're going to go to a class and learn about stress and how stress affects you, or, you're going to seek out a teacher that can help you to do that. So absolutely what you've said, change starts small. I was completely overwhelmed when I met Alyson. I thought I had to move mountains. And the beauty of a coach is you realise actually you're powerful right now, and every journey starts with a small step. So if someone's watching this feeling completely overwhelmed, thinking the only thing I can do to help myself is hand my notice in, no, polar opposite, in fact. The small changes happen right now, and they can, as I say, be very small, and then they start to add up, and you can really find yourself, taking control of your life. It's brilliant.
Okay. And Alyson, have you got anything to add to that? I'm sure you have. I hope you have.
Yeah, of course. Being a resilience practitioner, I'm bound to say, fostering a productive, resilient approach to life, which is very much what Kate was saying, is around the self-care. Self-care is a slightly overbandied word at the moment, as is probably resilience, but, it's practical and it means something different to everybody. So everybody listening on the call will say, what does self-care mean to you? What do you need to do about it? And as Kate said, it's small steps. It might be that, it isn't about just necessarily going for a walk. People say to me, oh, please don't tell me I need to go for a walk. But we know there's a lot of practical things like that do really help. because of the way our brain connects with everything else, as Kate's already suggested. Walking is actually one of the easiest ways of calming the anxiety down and creating that balance. So it's all about balance. The other thing around resilience is and as Kate mentioned, is sense checking your energy levels. It's just recognizing when your energy is depleted and thinking about maybe what is it that is depleting my energy. But if I'm going to continue to work in this way, how can I top my energy levels up? So it is that thing about listening to the inner voice, listening to what do you need. I love that question when I'm coaching particular clients. I say, what do you need right now? When did somebody last ask you what you need? It's such a fantastic question. And it might just be, I need a bit of time, or I need a bit of support, or I need to connect to my resources, whether they're personal, professional, whatever. I need to be a bit more compassionate about myself. I need to make some small steps to make those changes. I need some purpose. And working with Kate, it was really interesting. I can remember the very first meeting when we talked about purpose and we talked about vision, and we kind of timelined that vision. And I made her walk up and down a room and say, right, where were you 6 months ago? Where are you now? Where do you want to be in 6 months' time? And what steps are you going to take to do that? And it was really interesting. So that whole connecting to your purpose really helps, but really sense checking your energy levels is the key.
And I think from what you're both saying as well is that there's lots of small things that you can do, and it's like a lot of areas, isn't it? It's maybe trying one or two of them out and finding out what works for one person might not work for somebody else's. So try different things, and then be kind to yourself to actually then say, okay, well, how did I feel after doing that? Did that work? Did that give me the breathing space or the ability to recuperate a little bit? What was the positive impact of that? And if it didn't do enough, then well, what else can I do? We've got another question coming, which I think is a really nice one to bring in from David K, who's saying, what if your burnout is caused by toxic colleagues that are passive aggressive but play the game? That's a meaty question, isn't it? So we could do a whole section on that one, David. But what's your thoughts, either one of you, on that question?
I mean, if I start by thinking about it, I mean, it's not just the colleagues; it's the organisation. The organisation needs to address toxic behaviour. But I would encourage people to voice it, and that's the hard part, is to actually be able to out it, if that's the right word, to be able to talk about it and say, this is unacceptable. And again, I have a particular thing about passive aggressive behaviour, but just being able to. And again, an organisation being able to use the data, use the statistics. Don't just take people's word for it. This is absolutely happening. I told you the stats from the McKinsey survey 2022 were actually quite damning. And it's not about organisations putting in place a yoga session at lunchtime. It is actually them about addressing some of these really serious issues around an inclusive workplace, creating psychological safety, and outing toxic behaviour.
Yeah, and I think before we came on live, we were having a conversation around the well-being equivalent of greenwashing, and making sure that there aren't interventions that are there for people that work for you just to make you feel better as the owner or the boss of the business. They actually do provide a positive impact on the people. I was smiling when you were saying all of that, and I wasn't laughing at what you were saying, I promise, Alyson. I was smiling because David's put another comment in saying, asking for a friend, which I always love it when somebody does that. So his question was, there you go. What if your burnout is caused by, I'm asking for a friend. So if we just return to what can you do about it? Is there anything else before we move on to finishing off the session and thinking about some really good tips for people that are watching today or watching on catch up. Is there anything else that you can think of that are good things that we can do about it?
Just going back to David's comment on this as well, if you've reached burnout, it doesn't really matter why you've reached burnout. You have to recognize that you've got to put yourself first. And maybe that does come under the umbrella. What can I do about it? I'm going to prioritize me. I'm going to work out exactly what Alyson said. What do I need right now? And, formulating, some action steps, whatever that might be, to help you to manage the stress. And the other thing is, okay, burnout might be caused by toxic colleagues or whatever, that workplace environment. But if you wanted to venture down the road of mindfulness as one possible solution to managing stress, you come to realize that you can change your responses to anything, including the toxic colleague. And you may be thinking, people watching this thinking, well, that's impossible. I know the people that Kate's talking about. She hasn't got a clue. It is possible to change your mindset, your attitude, and the physical response that you have to these people through mindfulness and meditation.
Okay. And Alyson, anything else to add to what you can do about it?
I mean, I suppose just going back to, again, what Kate said and I said about voicing your needs, I think it's voicing your needs, but ensuring that they are being listened to. It's not about just going and having a whinging session. It is about what is a company going to do about it? And how can you, we talked about supporting yourself, but how can you insist that this is something that people need to take seriously? And only by making these changes in organizations are people going to take this stuff seriously. And as I said before, go back to your data. What's it showing? What's the absenteeism levels like? What's the presenteeism levels like? What's going on? Why are people quietly quitting? That whole expression of quiet quitting. People are resigning because they can't face up to these situations. People need to be asking questions around what's happening in organizations.
And I think, again, going back to the point we were making earlier about, sort of being blinkered and getting to that sort of breaking point, that the coach in me wants to say, well, this is where you are now. How are you going to go forward? What decisions can you make for yourself? What can you influence or change? Rather than getting, you've got to look at why it's happened, but rather than going too far backwards about, well, how did we get here, is trying to think about what can I do? And I think that's probably a really good question to think about. So a little bit conscious of time, so I'm going to go with our last banner at the bottom there, burnout, top tips. So Alyson, give me a top tip for around the subject of burnout. Don't say don't burn out, because I won't accept that one. I want something more tangible.
Well, actually, to that point, joking aside, Dean, it happens to the best of us, and if you are experiencing that, or you think you are, you're not alone, sadly, but it can happen in all contexts of life, and I think it's about exploring those energy levels. When I worked in resilience in the practitioner role that I do, it is about thinking about what gives you energy, but what drains your energy as well. It's always an interesting one when people say, oh, actually my work drains my energy, or my boss drains my energy, or there's a negative person, maybe you're passive aggressive person, but how do you create that balance so that, like Kate said, there are things you can do to not allow that to affect you as much, but topping your energy batteries up. And also, that whole thing about boundaries is my other one, which is linking that to creating balance both professionally and socially. If somebody is pressurizing you to do stuff you don't want to do, in the words of a famous author that I follow, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no.
There's another question that came in while we were talking then, and you were talking about strengths and what depletes your energy. And as a coach that focuses around strengths-based approaches sometimes. I was really intrigued by this, about how can the principles and practices of positive psychology help in avoiding burnout. And I think that's a real key part of it, is thinking about, well, what are the strengths that are at my disposal that I can use? If I know what depletes my energy, I always talk to people about, well, how do you regain that energy back again? What can you do? And those small little, going for a walk or breathing or meditation or any of those well-being small things that you can do for yourself are all things that it's finding how do you give yourself that, how do you recharge, how do you reset, how do you boost your energy again. Any other top tips, Kate? I haven't asked you about top tips. I need to ask you about top tips.
I think number one, exactly what Alyson said, know that this isn't your fault, but also know that you are incredibly powerful, and you're only powerful at one point ever, and that's right now. So if you want to change anything in your life, you can only do it now. But you don't need to move mountains. You can start small, and you're never alone. None of us are ever alone. And there are plenty of resources out there that you can tap into, practical things that you can start doing now to really dig into your self-care.
Brilliant. I can't believe that our half an hour has flown by. We could probably have a whole series around this area. But I think if people are watching this and it's triggered something in them, or they're inspired to make those changes for themselves, then it's been a half an hour of great investment to be able to start that journey for themselves. So can I just say thank you both for joining me today. I've thoroughly enjoyed the time with you today, and I'm going to end the session now. Anything else to add before I click that final red button to close the session?
I would just like to say one thing is and it's a shameless plug for Kate, because we have a very mutual relationship. We've supported each other, but Kate's meditation sessions are amazing. If you haven't tried it before, try it. Give it a go.
Thanks, Alyson. Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, everyone, thanks. I'm more interested in the Himalayan retreat. Oh, that sounded quite interesting, isn't it? But then when you said move mountains, I thought maybe not. Thank you both, and thank you everybody for tuning in or watching us on our various different social channels. Thank you ever so much, everybody. And our next session, we'll be publishing news of our next session. So please look out for our next session on LinkedIn very, very soon. Thank you, everybody, and bye for now. So bye.
Bye.
Bye.